to sit on the shelf for years and years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You heard different than I did. It's gonna keep going up, Kelly.
Well, everything goes up, but the
Oh, yeah.
drastic increase we're in
Don't
right
think
now.
don't think it's gonna come down until we get somebody else in the White House.
Do we have any other board comment or questions on this item? Any public comment? Board comment? Yes. Back to you.
Thanks. So I had a couple of items I would like to bring up because I know that we're doing it now in April, so this will give staff time to think about the comments that I have. First off, I do want to thank you guys for putting together the budget and trying to get a good picture, trying to make sure our finances are stable. And I'm going to bring up these items one by one, and so we can just discuss it and get a good consensus, or shoot it down from there. The first one, this is mostly a notification for future board staff members and for future clarification, is to rename the Fund 30, Department Fund 30 lighting to lighting and landscaping, so it's congruent with the language that's used in most codes. No, that's a very, it's just a little language, it's a language thing, I know. It says lighting, but
You can probably do that. I don't know if it really means anything other than it's just a label.
it really is, it's a label, it's a minor thing, but I just want to.
We can talk to the auditor and see if there's any problem with doing that with the audit, and we can go from there.
Right, because as we move down the road, we don't know if future staff members or anyone else is going to get confused as to why something's being done a certain way. Is that okay with
That
the
makes sense to me.
The next one, oops, I put the wrong document. The next one is I would like to request some funding in Department Fund 30 for a new ordinance. This is a requirement for grant opportunities for that fund. It specifically says we have to have an ordinance for those services, and we do not have it. And I don't expect
We need an ordinance for what services?
it's for lighting and landscaping. We have an ordinance. We only have a policy and a resolution. We don't have an ordinance for them.
Okay, well that would be a project which would have to be specially approved. So whether that's in the operation and budget or not is kind of irrelevant. It would be a budget adjustment, and most likely it would come from capital, because it's an overall master plan for that, or master plan type of lighting code.
Right. Because that's what I wanted to know is, I think in the past we've actually budgeted it, weird way we put some money towards notifications and then put some towards, I forget the other fund category. I remember we did that for water and sewer, their ordinances at one point.
If we're going to take the money straight out of regular revenue, then it should be in this budget.
Right.
Depending on what the scope is and what the actual cost is, it most likely would either come out of reserves or out of capital, in which case being in this budget doesn't really make any difference. Then, on the other side of that, we'll need to assess what that's going to cost. And most likely there would have to be some sort of transfer from reserves to pay for it anyway. So my recommendation at this point would be to keep that on the top of our list as a project, and we can bring that back and do a budget adjustment for that.
We've done that before, and things end up falling by the wayside for over a year.
Well, honestly, sometimes it takes a year or more to get things done, and that's just the way it is. Not that anybody's slacking or trying to put it off.
I'm not saying that. But it just feels like when we've been around here for 8 years, that happens a lot.
I've been here for 14 years. I've seen all sorts of things happen here. But yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
And if you would like to talk to me a little bit more what you think about that, or about the ordinance, then we can get a better idea of what it's going to cost. And
what's it need
then
to
we
say?
can if we can get that together soon, we can put it in the budget now. If we can't get that together in the next month, then we'll have to bring it back as an adjustment.
I think that we can probably get it done. I don't expect it to cost that much. It just needs to state, I think it's lighting and the landscaping, and that opens us up to the grants for future projects in that classification. And I mentioned it to you in the past, I think, that one of the grants, and it said you had to have an ordinance for specifically landscaping. Yeah. But,
So,
and it's, I mean, literally for the grant, we need all the classifications or requirement. It's just, the only thing we didn't meet was you needed an ordinance for it. That was why it was just like,
You have a sample one?
sample of the requirements.
No, sample ordinance, sometimes they.
I think there is actually one on that website, which I can probably just forward on over.
Forward that on.
And then you can use
Well,
pieces, you know.
if you have something handy, forward it to me, and then we can talk about it, and then we can take it from there. If we can get it together for the May meeting, then we can potentially include the cost in the budget.
And then generally, I guess, so projects like that, you're thinking those are gonna be come out of reserves, they're not gonna be a budget item? Is that what you're thinking when it comes to?
So anything that's going to be a capital project
Okay,
isn't included in the revenue,
right,
or in the operation and maintenance. If it's coming out of regular rate revenue or regular property tax, then it should be in this, because this is that money.
right,
Capital money is going to have to be board approved, and the transfer of that money, or use of that money would be board approved. So we're gonna take that money from capital and then put it into this budget.
okay. And then, so, does any board members have any comments on that item or anything? Is it, I don't know. I want to make sure that I'm not just like, you know, doing anything that the board's like, what the heck is he talking about?
No,
Sounds good.
no issue with that.
Question before I move on. What is our general fund breakdown allotments? I know some weird percentage formula number. Do you know that off the top of your head? Or can you give me a rough estimate?
I can tell you exactly what it is for the proposed budget in approximately 2 seconds.
Oh boy.
I'm sorry. Well, I better go home then.
I know it's changed over the years. It was,
Yeah.
I have a sticky note on my desk.
The new one? I think so. I'll go grab it. I'll hit it with.
also, I think it's good for the board and everyone to be refreshed on that allotment, because I know that just,
So for 2020, 2021, the breakdown was 23% fire, 2% lighting, 35% wastewater, 38% water, and 2% solid waste. For the proposed 2021-22 budget, we're looking at 20.5% for fire, 2% for lighting, 38% for wastewater, 37.5% for water, and 2% for solid waste.
okay. So 2% of general fund expenditures comes from soft.
It's not general fund, it's
I know, it's
shared, we call them shared expenses.
right.
You start getting down in admin and general fund things, and it, you know,
We start hyperventilating.
it brings back PTSD.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
No.
So thank you for that clarification. And then the big thing that I wanted to bring up that is O&M, unfortunately, is I would like to request, in order for us to meet certain, to legally support the district and our strategic planning goals, is to create a new department fund, with Department Fund 70. I know that there's a funding matrix that I have in front of me that would not impact existing operations, but I do know that as we talk about some of those projects and goals, that we are kind of limited in what we can do and how we can do those projects.
So,
And I know you're
rewind
saying,
just 2 seconds here.
right?
So you want to create a new fund to do what?
It will support this. Let me read this off correctly. I call it the Community Development Fund. It opens up the CSD and Community Up for Economic Development grants, one of which is actually coming up in November of this year. specifically for this kind of community. But more importantly, it legally supports the CSD in pursuing quality of life projects and the strategic planning goals. This is make sure we aren't accused of any gifts of public funds, and so we can do certain projects like the community website we've talked about, and some other things that have come up in the past. But we're right now in our current funding model, we're limited in what we can do. This, what I'm proposing, would give us the flexibility to and also provide the legal coverage and give us more grant funding.
How would you fund this?
What I'm proposing,
You know that check.
he's going to write a check. Funding matrix. So account number 43,000 comes from the general 1% property tax, so that is not restricted revenue. It's found on pages 2 of the notes.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I know.
Cut you off.
Okay. Yes.
So my understanding from conversation before and where you seem to be going right now is you want to take money from the other 5 departments to fund this department.
No, that would not be, because you actually just cut me off from getting my proposal.
So where are you getting
So where exactly are you getting money from?
Right now, I'm proposing, there's only 2 funds. One of which has run a surplus significantly over the years, which is the lighting landscaping fund. I'm proposing, what I wrote down here was 24,000, which is, what is 24,000 for lighting and landscaping, and then it was 33,000 from the sanitary property tax fund. Overall, this equals roughly 1.8% of the overall CSD budget, and the funding request is lower than the rate increased revenue. This funding in our big picture is very small. It shouldn't have an impact on the operations of any of those other funds. I mean, unless you're going to tell me that we're completely up the creek on both those funds.
So I'm just gonna say right now that taking any money from wastewater or water for anything other than wastewater or water is a horrible idea. We're going through a rate increase, which nobody's happy about.
Right.
I'm assuming that nobody on the board is super happy about. So taking any money away from wastewater, specifically when we have a huge looming project, is not recommended.
I completely agree. And Mr. Dodd, I completely agree with that. I know that we've also spoken, and we've heard from the community that our rates are pretty high. Some people aren't happy with the rates in this community.
All right.
I know, right?
Well,
but we have tools available to potentially lower the rates of this community and increase revenues. We have those tools, one of which is a standby charge that other agencies do use, and we can use those things to help pay for our projects and lower people's bills in this community. If we're really worried about, we can just do it. If you want to do that, you're working.
you can't just do that.
I can make a recommendation, and you guys can break.
You can't just start charging somebody. It doesn't work that way.
No, you have to create a rate study. I've sat here long enough. I know that you have to create a rate study, go through a process.
So
But the standby charge is something that, regardless of when we do a rate study, is something that I will be bringing up. And I've told you about, and I'm talking about other ways, to pay for our projects.
And I'm 100% in favor of bringing that up as an option for the next rate study. However, at this point in time, I don't think that it's a good idea to take $33,000 from wastewater.
Well, what we can also do is at some point, I don't know if even we should be using property tax funding for wastewater. It's something we can discuss as a board, but even the $24,000 from the lighting and landscaping fund is more than enough to get started on those projects.
So right now, we're proposing a net overrun, or a... Yes, thank you.
Yeah, lighting is part of the...
A net surplus of $3,235 in lighting. And you want to take $24,000.
And out of the eight years I've been on this board, lighting has never once come close to meeting its revenue. It's never come close to that. It's always run under. In fact, it's been about 20 to 30, and now I think this year it's going to go up to 50,000? You know, costs?
I don't know offhand, no.
Well, I mean, what you're looking at, I mean, I actually can't even think of the last time we've actually done the budget in April as well.
We did last year.
We did last year.
And the year before.
And the year before that.
But it's because our board keeps this damn thing off to September. I get confused on that. But
No, it was your prior
was it prior?
operate, yeah.
I'm just confused though.
Prior regime.
Can you backtrack? I'm really confused as to what you're trying to
What I-
accomplish by gathering $50,000. What do you plan on spending that $50,000 on, and what do you plan on accomplishing with this expenditure
Well-
of $50,000?
As I also, during board comment at our special meeting, I had actually asked for us to potentially look, either figure out or wait on the budget so we can get through the rest of the strategic planning process and the stuff we're going to talk about in May. So then we wouldn't be so confused.
I was on fire.
I know.
Sorry.
You know, things happen, but we have projects, we have,
And these projects are,
Anything else?
they're the 5 projects that we've talked about for the strategic planning
Signs
process.
in the street
To postpone
there,
it,
sidewalks.
I think the gist of what Dr. Collins is trying to get at is there are things that we would want or like to spend money on for the betterment or quality of life here in San Miguel, but without having an established fund, there's really no way to fund those type of projects, which we collectively have all talked about and said would be beneficial for the community. So I think that that's what he's driving at.
Yes.
So,
well, it seems to me it's getting scurried and backtracked and back and forth. Yes, we want to do betterment. Well, we want to do strategic planning. We might need 50, we could do 20. It's clear as mud, in my opinion. I'm sorry I appear to be coming in late on this. I'm not privy to the email conversations that go on prior to the meeting, so it's kind of hitting me blind, and I don't understand, A, why you need $50,000, and B, what you plan on doing with it. Those questions are clear in my mind. The answers are not.
I don't think there's been a cost established for the 5 identified projects that.
Well, he just said he wanted $30,000 from one fund and $24,000 from another fund, so that's $54,000 and change.
No, I think the specific projects, I don't think that the final cost or, there's been no assessment to identify
Right.
specifically what the cost would be to fulfill those projects.
But then scurried into a corner about grants and we're going to get money with this money.
We legally have to create the fund so we can actually apply for those grants.
so
for
what
those
is, what
projects.
is it that you want to call this fund?
The fund is I wrote down just.
I know you've done research on it, so.
I know.
Community development fund is what you said.
I use the word community development fund. Technically, if you're going to use the words our accounting state code would be quality of life. That sounds, you know.
Quality
just
of
so-
life.
Hey Calvin, I want a lower sewer rate too.
Well, I do too.
That would improve quality
Well,
of life.
you're spending more money.
I just said, you know, we can have some, you
Take
know.
the $50,000 you're trying to take from the people in San Miguel and lower the rates.
So I'm not gonna say that I don't think it's a good idea to create something to do that. I know that some of your projects do align with some of our current departments, and those projects should come out of those departments.
Sure.
We can definitely look and see what we can do about creating a separate fund. However, I have a feeling that if it's not aligned with one of our current powers, that we're probably not gonna have an easy road to get there. I mean, we can always create a fund and call it whatever we want, for whatever money we want, but when the auditor comes around and says, okay, so I see you took, just the number, 24,000 from lighting, and you put it over in this fund 70 for quality of life, how does that relate to lighting?
Sure. No,
And they're gonna wanna see that, so we need to build that case for that. So, we can take a look at that and see what we can do to do that. It may be that some projects can't get done under our current mission because it's not part of what we do.
Right.
If we can create a fund to do that, then we can take seed money from lighting and go do that. Lighting's got money, but taking it straight out of their operating budget is not, I don't think that's appropriate.
But we need, so.
They have reserves, we can borrow from the reserve.
Right.
Or you have to pay it back.
Yeah.
You've been here long enough, that's a
I know.
We have, I'm pretty sure we have paid back.
One thing, and I asked you where it was funding from.
Yeah.
And when I came into the general manager spot, we had an administration fund.
I know.
And it didn't have a revenue source. It basically lived off the other funds. And in my opinion, it got far out of control. There was money that was placed in there that didn't have a purpose. And then it was arbitrarily moved and spent in areas that had no tracking. It didn't have any forethought, no master plan. It wasn't a small amount of money.
No.
At the same time, you had a water department that was operating at $100,000 in the red. In other
Yes.
words, that was living off of these other funds as well. So I'm cautious, and I'm not in favor necessarily of creating this fund just yet. My big thing would be the revenue for it, and it supports itself. There is a plan for what it does, and I think you've got some of that information. But before we were to just move forward and create this fund and go throw some money in it, borrowed from one of the other funds, and we get ourselves in a place where it's not generating revenue and it doesn't have a clear reason for existence, we have to be very cautious with that, because that was very detrimental to our standing in our audits and in our financial status, and we had to
Absolutely.
take some very significant changes to get us back on track and where I see where we're at now. And there's more of a divide between the funds, just because that's how you track and maintain those funds, knowing if they're generating revenue, if they're supporting themselves. Our rate increases based on how they're performing.
Absolutely.
And we know if we can lower rates, or if we can higher rates, or if we can not do anything to rates for a period of time. There's a lot of things we can do. But if we start creating something and we don't have a clear path, we're gonna find ourselves in a situation like we were in before. So if we can answer those questions, then I think it's something we can move forward on. But without that, I would be against it.
So what my proposal is specifically would be to isolate a small amount of funding, not actively put money towards it, but just isolate it in paper. And as we move into May, when we talk about our strategic planning, our other goals, then it'll become more clear to figure out what we can and can't do. There is a legal mechanism that is not general fund that we use to fund this. It's a very specific legal mechanism, because general fund, that was a complete mess. I remember seeing, I think the previous managers tried to
You
throw
mean administrative fund?
administrative fund, general fund, what
It was administrative fund.
Right.
General fund is where all your monies are kept, but the administrative fund was.
Right.
The-
That Fund 10 that was at one point, that they tried throwing everything into it, swirling it around, and that was, you know, that was not good. So what I would like to propose though is to figure out if we can isolate some funding on paper until we can discuss it in May. And then we can bring any changes back with either May or June.
I can guarantee you right now that the money from lighting will still be there in May.
But I don't want, see, the thing is, I'd like to at least have it just being developed and being thought about. Sorry, then we're not in May going, oh shoot, you know, we haven't really thought about it, we gotta get this budget done because the end of the fiscal year is here. If it's April, we can talk about it, we can get that now formulated.
So what I'll do is I will work with Rob and Aaron and figure out what we legally can do. And if we can legally create a department fund and fund it, then we'll bring it back that way. If it's not gonna be done in the next 2 weeks, then it'll have to come back later.
I know some of the specific codes that refer to the process, and I can also send that to Aaron and.
And whatever information you've dug up in your research, if you wanna pass it along, that'll probably speed things up.
What does the board think of this? Is this I don't know, I want.
A couple of questions.
Yes.
Director
Yeah.
Collins. Is there any, well, first of all, could this work if this couldn't be directly funded through lighting and stay there? It stayed, could it be as a loan? Would that work?
So-
Or a grant situation?
We'd have to look at that specific grant to figure out if they're gonna want us to somehow pay it back, or if we're just gonna be able to get it for, you know,
Okay, so do you have, is there some reason why you're looking at 54? Is that just an arbitrary number, a
So
good starting point?
I was looking at a little bit of flexibility because I know that one of the projects was a Wi-Fi project, which obviously that's very expensive. You know, that a portion of that could actually help start that. I do know when I was looking at the other department funds that, I mean, we're looking at, even with lighting and solid waste, we're looking at 30% of that department's revenue already going to staffing. So I was already budgeting in staffing costs being attributed to that. And then, of course, in that staffing cost, I didn't account for the legal costs that also come from those departments too. So you're looking probably about 40% of the department fund are being consumed by general staffing. So,
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
just a second. Another question though is,
yes.
are you, I mean, with these grants, because is it like matching funds that?
I'm trying to remember the exact language that was used for it. I actually was working on a document to present in May that would go into detail on that grant. But I do remember.
So you have some specific?
Yes,
Okay.
it's specifically, there's $200 million available for rural economic development for disadvantaged communities, which our CSD qualifies for. And usually, a lot of times, those kinds of grant fundings are only meant for counties and cities. But a CSD in this one can actually apply for those grants. So that's why it's like, this is an opportunity, the deadline's coming for November, and so it's like, if we can make something happen with it,
I see.
you know, that's what I'm looking at.
So, you threw out the number of approximately 40%.
That was my number? Yeah.
In a department like that where you're doing very specific things, unless you hire somebody specifically to do all those things, your staffing is going to be next to nothing.
Is that, okay.
So if you want to look at a relationship like that, look at lighting and solid waste.
I did.
And, well, not solid waste. Don't look at solid waste. That's a bad example. So look at lighting. Lighting is only taking a small percentage of 5 people or 6 people's pay.
Sure.
So if you were to do projects like that under a separate department, then you would be looking at something similar to that. And, you know, initially, you're not going to need as much money to get started. You're going to use most of your money for project, for actual cost, not staffing costs. Because you're going to have to borrow people from other departments.
Sure.
You're going to tell them?
I'm going to tell them. So, just as a caveat, I was looking into a SAFER grant, it's a fire grant, and it led me to a state website. The state website, I don't know the exact link, but I'm sure I can get it easy enough, was for disadvantaged communities. We are not a disadvantaged community. We have been reclassified. We are in the process of being reclassified, and all the disadvantaged communities basically are in the Central Valley. So we did not qualify in that arena. So pretty much the whole Central Coast, San Francisco, all the way down, no longer disadvantaged communities anywhere in that region.
What criteria specifically? Is it income?
Whatever the state had mandated, this is the determination of a median household income determining a disadvantaged community, and we do not qualify. There is nothing in our area that is a disadvantaged community any longer, according to the state's website for disadvantaged communities.
Did that recently change?
I was looking into it, excuse me, March 10th, approximately.
Oh, this year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's just recently, it's
Just
coming out with the new census results.
Yeah.
It's based on median household income, and with all the new homes that we have here and the new people we have here, it's taken us out of it.
And it costs a lot of money to live here, so, you know,
Right.
So,
Right.
That opens up a very more interesting question. You know, because I've been around here long enough, I know that we relied on disadvantaged community grant funding.
well, we haven't relied on it, we've enjoyed it.
We've enjoyed it, but losing that source of funding, you know, moving down the road is going to make other projects more difficult.
Well, it's gonna make getting higher grant percentages more difficult. Getting funding is based on our ability to repay it. Fortunately, to this point, the USDA and the Department of Funding at the state level has maintained our disadvantaged community status because we started the process with them as a disadvantaged community. And we're not like, all of a sudden everybody's flush with cash here and driving Rolls Royce and things like that. So, I mean, we're like barely over the line. Over the line. So next year, like this year and next year, when they finally formalize the census results, we're not going to be a disadvantaged community.
We don't even have a grocery store.
You don't look at that.
Oh my God.
We were a
No.
food desert for quite
So
some time.
we're getting a little bit off track here, but I guess basically to circle back around to your proposal, we will look at what it's going to take to do that.
Okay.
If you can send us whatever information you have, that'll speed things up. If we can have something together by May, or for the May meeting, we will do that. It may be something where we need several months for you guys to approve new things to be in the budget. In that case, if this is legitimate and we can do it, then the money will still be in lighting and we can still borrow money from lighting if that's legitimate. No matter what month you ask me, I'm still going to tell you no, you can't borrow money from wastewater or water. Just as a side note, because I feel like I have to say it, the water and wastewater funds, no matter what they're derived from, are enterprise funds. So taking money from them can really only be a loan.
If it's rate revenue under Prop 218 guidelines.
Well, the revenue for the property tax was based on a bond for sewer improvement. So you're basically taking what people are paying for their sewer bond and wanting to reallocate it somewhere else.
The interesting thing, though, I've asked about this for years about the sewer bond. Is it a bond? Is it attached to the 1%? Is it the 1%? What's going on with that? And I heard both stories from the county, and the last thing I heard was that this was actually official. This was 1% general and not wrong. Because if it's a bond, generally you don't get the money. It usually gets paid off and the county keeps it. And because that's what they're doing with the water bond on the terrace. We don't see a dime of that. That's not
anymore.
There's actually still one left on the on the books.
Yeah.
And we've never once seen
They were
it.
paying us the residual from that, basically the interest that people were paying.
But we never had a line item for it.
We had years and years ago.
I'm
Basically,
and I don't want to get into
so I'm going to say something that our auditor has said multiple times over the years, is if you're going to borrow money, borrow it from one place. Because the more places you borrow it from, the more convoluted it gets.
Sure.
And so if we were going to do this, my recommendation would be to borrow it from lighting, who is not hurting at all. So if we're going to borrow it from somebody that doesn't need it. And I'll just leave it at that. And we can revisit this. And if you want to come in and talk to us about it, then we definitely meet about it and go over what you have. I think that would be more productive than what we're doing right now.
But we never have any conversations. We always approve everything.
I think at this point we're kind of going.
But from the board, is this a direction? What does the board think?